sort of put together. I'm so sorry for being extraordinarily late. All I can say is don't ever join the department of a major conservatory because you'll regret it. So my name is Byron Knutson, and we're going to be talking about operetta for the next few days, which is, well, as you know, a very broad and vague complex of stuff. Before we get right into it, actually, can we just go around the room and you just tell me all your names, because, and I will forget, I'm so sorry. It's just, I will have to ask, for the next 5 days, I will be asking you every time I see you what your name is.
Sophia.
Sorry?
Sophia.
Sophia, hi.
My name is Isa.
Isa, hi.
Hi.
Carly.
Carly?
Lucia.
Lucia, yeah, Lucia?
Yeah, on the program I'm Joy Kwan, but I have a name as Sarah.
Okay, Sarah, okay. I will probably learn your Korean name at some point.
Yeong.
Yeong, hi.
And Erica.
Erica. Erica! Hi.
Hi.
Yes, we know each other. You look very different.
Oh. Thanks. But I had a short last time. Oh.
I don't remember. When did I see you last? Okay, we'll talk. We'll catch up in the break. We'll go on. Okay, so my name is Byron. Just a little bit about myself, because the lady suggested that I should introduce myself, because, I hate this part, but so I've lived in Germany for almost 20 years. In this summer it will be 20 years, and I came, as we all do, to find work in German theaters. And when I came, I had a really great 5-year plan, and yeah, as they say, life is what happens when you're making other plans. And 20 years later, I'm still here, and won't be leaving, because this is my life now, which is great. I'm very happy, but it took many left turns. And I was talking about this with someone yesterday. We all have this idea of what our plan is. How am I going to start a career, and how I'm going to build a career, and how I'm going to keep the career going, and it never works out like that. So, when I came 20 years ago, maybe there was still, we've all read, maybe you guys haven't, because it's, Keine Angst Baby, that one, or What the Fach, all of those books that, how to make a career in singing in Germany. And maybe some of the things that were in those books still applied 20 years ago, but they don't apply anymore. I'm sure you've all heard, the Fach system is breaking up, and the future of opera is in peril, and none of those things are quite as dramatically true as they might sound when you do them in the little soundbite version. It's like the Fach system, I put it in air quotes like it's stupid because it is kind of stupid, is still very powerful, there's no question, but it's changing, sometimes on a weekly basis. So we're going to talk about that a lot. Most of you have brought all the same repertoire, so we're going to be talking a little bit about the Fach during that time. So anyway, 20 years ago I arrived in Germany without a job. The most terrifying phone conversation I made in my entire life was the first one in German to an agent going, please represent me. It was at ZFV, which we've all been there, done that. And they did actually send me on one audition. I didn't get the job, which turned out to be okay, actually. But I didn't get the job. I'm sure you've all had experiences with the ZFV. In various, everyone knows what that is, right? It's the state agency. There's a state-sponsored, a state-run agency for singers to find work in opera houses. And they're required by law to hear everybody who presents themselves, which is, of course, about 12 million singers. So there are all these hurdles you have to get past in order to actually get an audition with them, and then they will probably tell you, well, we can't do anything for you. That's That's the short story. That's enough.
Very good summarized.
Yeah. So, sorry, we're spending a lot of time talking about operetta, so we're going to be laughing, hopefully a lot, so that's why all the laughing. So, the more, I mean, of course, I'm a pianist and conductor and all of those kinds of things, which is very different than being a singer, but I actually found that the best way to get one job and then move from job to job is to meet as many people as possible and just talk to them, and it's called networking. Again, I'm putting the air quotes like it's stupid, because it is kind of stupid. We're musicians, we're artists. One of the things that we should be good at is communicating, and we hope that the fact that we like meeting people and we like communicating is, first of all, it makes us good for our job, but it also makes that other stuff simpler as well. And Rebecca's going to talk about this a lot in the next, when she arrives tomorrow, when she talks about how to get cast in operetta. That's good. One of the things that she's going to talk about, I think, is how to convince people that you just happen to meet, that you bring the professional skills that are necessary for you to be hired. That's so much more than just, I mean, an audition is an audition. Yes, you have to sing beautifully, and there's all that audition stuff, but the subtext of an audition is, do I trust that person enough to bring a level of professionalism that I can use in my place? That's the subtext, and that's somehow the more difficult bit. Again, it's the subtext. It's unausgesprochen. How much German do you guys speak? Because I may just, if I drift off into German and you don't get it, then just say, Byron, stop. Yeah. So by meeting people and then going on auditions, I did actually get my first job I got the job in '99, and started in February of 2000 in Kiel, in the Bühnen der Landeshauptstadt Kiel as a coach and conductor. And I was there for 3 seasons and coached and conducted quite a lot. Coached everything and conducted quite a bit. Then I went to Halle an der Saale, which is a city between Berlin and Leipzig, and was there for 5 seasons, and again coached everything and conducted really a lot there. And then, hi, welcome. Sorry, tell me your name.
Sarah.
Oh, of course, Sarah. Hi. Now I see who you are.
I think last time I saw you, I had her down here.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Welcome. So I spent 5 seasons in Halle, and after 5 seasons is sort of like the time where it's like, either you have to plan to spend the rest of your life there, or it's time to move on. So I moved on, and I spent 1 season in Augsburg, which was not a good idea. I mean, I arrived and then immediately started looking for a new job, which I then did get, and I came in 2009 back to Berlin, and started working at the Komische Oper, where I was again for 5 seasons, and the last 4 I was the musical director of the young artist program at the Komische Oper. And then when I left the Komische Oper, I was I was freelance for about 3 weeks before I got a job at the Hans Eisler, where I'm now professor of musikalische Studienleitung, so operatic studies, and one of the musical directors of the opera department at the Hans Eisler. So that's all about me. That's the introduction. So, operetta. I'm just going to start asking a bunch of questions, and everybody jump in. So, what is operetta? Yes?
Music with spoken text.
Music with spoken text, okay? Yes? Very good. Dictionary answer. What about The Merry Wives of Windsor? Or Freischütz?
There's spoken text and flashes.
There's spoken text in Freischütz, but is it an operetta? What about The Magic Flute?
But there's,
Art.
yeah.
Oh,
What about the magic flute? Is the magic flute an operetta?
No.
No, I don't think anyone would consider magic flute an operetta. Abduction from Australia?
Would people consider Fleischer's operettas?
No.
A very decisive answer, no. Is Fleischer, would you consider Fleischer's to be more of an operetta than magic flute?
Yeah.
No? Why not?
Deutsche Spieloper.
This is 100% correct. This is 100% correct. Pieces like Fleischer's, like Lustige Weiber von Windsor, Zahn Zimmermann, this kind of piece is in fact called Deutsche Spieloper, so it's not an operetta. So we're going to come back to the Deutsche Spieloper in just a second. Let's go back a little bit further in time. So we got to an Abduction, which is 1781, which we decided is not an operetta. Can you think of anything earlier than 1781? Am I right, or is it 1787? Oh my god. I knew I should have written all these dates down and I just, okay. Well, it doesn't matter. 1780s. It is 1781. Whatever, doesn't matter. So can you think of anything earlier that has spoken dialogue? And of course, if we go back to 1604, Monteverdi Orfeo, the whole point of it was that to get away from spoken dialogue. No? The whole point of inventing recitative was so that you don't have to speak and sing it, which is better. The earliest example I know of a piece being referred to as an operetta is Handel's Imeneo. Imeneo, second last opera by Handel, 1741, I think, or 42. And in fact, in many of the descriptions of people writing about the opera, people refer to it quite frequently as an operetta. And in fact, Handel, in one letter, did refer to it himself as an operetta. So, does anyone know that piece, Imeneo by Handel? Tell us about it.
I mean, no, I don't know. I know like 2 arias from that.
Okay, which one?
Mireza di Peniche is from Imeneo, right? And I can't remember the name of the other one.
Okay.
But long time ago.
It's a very charming piece, actually. I must say, it's really lovely. The thing about it, it's only about half as long as a normal Handel opera. So if you're ever looking for a short Handel opera, that's the one. It has it's a love triangle, much more so than other Handel operas. Most Handel operas have very complicated intrigues. I mean, even a piece like Giulio Cesare, where we think, okay, it's a very clear constellation, what is going on? It's very complex. It's very, there's a lot of back and forth and this and the other thing. And Imeneo, or Ariodante, for example, probably Handel's very best opera and also one of the very longest. It's an enormously complicated intrigue. I mean, ultimately it is just a love triangle, but it's an enormously complicated intrigue. And in Imeneo, the second last opera, it's a very clear development from the sort of high Baroque complexity to the sort of simplification of Rococo. There's a sort of gallant style to the music. The arias, generally speaking, are shorter, although there's one aria that I remember in one performance that I was at, one aria, it lasted 14 minutes. It's just so long. It's just so long. And it doesn't have to be this slow. And the conductor was like, yes, I think it's so important that we see into her soul for 14 minutes. And I'm like, no one else thinks this. Can we just go faster? No, we couldn't go faster. So even if it is faster, it's still 9-minute aria. I mean, it's one of Handel's very, very longest arias in one of the shortest operas in a very sort of simplified kind of constellation of interpersonal relationships. So there's a definite feeling already in the 18th century that the word operetta is a sort of simplification of opera. We kind of lose a little bit of track of what operetta is between the middle of the 18th century and the middle of the 19th century, because it's one of those words that people use without really having a very clear idea of what it really means, or at least during that period, this 100 years between 1740 and 1840. It's frequently used very disparagingly if you look at the written sources, and people say, oh, it's just an operetta, and what they really mean by that is it's just not a very good opera. Which is, nowadays for us, of course, not the same thing, because we don't really think of operetta as just being worse than something else, we just think of it as being different than something else. So I just want to talk a little bit about Deutsche Spieloper, or why don't you talk a little bit about Deutsche Spieloper?
It's opera with dialogue. They're speaking, but not a lot, but a little bit. They're talking a little bit, speaking, and but it's more more serious, I think, than operetta. It's more, how can I say, not more sad. It's not so funny. It's not so.
It's classical music.
Yeah, sorry.
It is classical music. And
Classical
operetta
music.
has a lot to do with dance music.
Yes.
Czardash, waltz.
Okay, very good point. Yes,
Yeah.
very good point. Let's just think about abduction for the seraglio one more time. Everybody knows abduction, right? I'm sure most of you are coloratura sopranos, so I'm sure you've all sung either Constanza or Blunted. Does anyone remember what the last number of abduction is called? It has a title. Does anyone remember? It's called a vaudeville.
Oh.
It's the same word we have in English, vaudeville. What's a vaudeville? Oh, I see furrowed brows. Everyone knows vaudeville. Yeah, vaudeville.
It's like a variety show, and it's comic in nature.
Exactly.
Very physical.
Exactly. We usually use the word vaudeville to refer to sort of American, the sort of late 19th century, early 20th century precursor of what is now Broadway. Really musical theater, the precursor of that. In the 18th century and into the 19th century, it really referred to a musical form where everyone in the group sings a verse and then everyone sings the refrain together. It comes up every now and then in the classical music of the 18th and 19th centuries. You'll see it every now and then. But it definitely plays into this comic, this development towards comedy from Deutsche Spieloper. I mean, how would you describe, if you had to put abduction on a seraglio from like absolute tragedy to absolute comedy, where would it fall on that spectrum? Yeah. Well, pretty much in the middle, exactly.
There's some funny elements and some are tragic, and it's like mixed. Because Operetta has to sing the funny things, and Diva, she has dramatic soprano has to sing the
more dramatic music.
sad arias.
I mean, whether she's happy or she's sad, the prima donna has to sing music that really expresses very profound emotion. Whether it's very very happy or very very sad, it's very different than, you mentioned the word souette. We're going to talk about that a lot, sort of over the next few days, not all today, but over the next few days. Is sort of more in the middle, her emotional range is much smaller than the prima donna, who gets, the upper scale and the lower scale. The reason Deutsche Spieloper came into existence, or one of the reasons, does anyone know who the emperor of the emperor in Vienna was, the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire was when abduction was written? It was Joseph II, a really important figure in European history in the late 18th century, and he was one of the people who was really, really interested in, I mean, we've all heard of the Enlightenment, right? The end of the 18th century, and Joseph II really took the Enlightenment into his Regierungsprogramm. One of the things that he found it really, really, really important is that people would become enlightened, that people would understand science, that people would sort of not just accept everything the church said at face value, that education became very important for him. Medical education, that people, that every village had to have a doctor. It was very important to him that people had access to, all the things that we think an enlightened society should have. That became very, very important and has left really strong marks, on especially Austrian society until today. I mean, you can see, many of the things that the way Austrians are the way they are right now is because of the reforms that Joseph II created at the end of the 18th century. I mean, he didn't live very long, and so his reform program got, sort of cut off. But one of the things that were of very profound importance for the development of opera was spoken dialogue, because this was supposed to create was supposed to make it easier for people who were not only nobles to have access to opera. And he thought that recitative it's too complicated, it's too high flown, it's too elite. So we're going to have opera with spoken dialogue so that everyone can at least take part in the spoken dialogue part, even if they don't really understand the music. They still can go to the opera and enjoy it. So this became a very important influence in German opera from the end of the 18th century. I mean, the magic flute, of course, into the 19th century with the development of Deutsche Spieloper. Okay, Fidelio falls like sort of right in between magic flute and Freischütz, 1821. What about Fidelio? Is Fidelio an operetta?
No.
I don't think anyone thinks that Fidelio could possibly be considered an operetta.
Abscheulich.
Yeah, they're not dancing.
There's no dancing.
Lena could dance around the table a bit. Okay.
I mean, there should be, but Fidelio could dancing, but there's no dancing in Fidelio. So definitely not operetta, and Freischütz, okay, so what's the difference between Freischütz and Fidelio? Because there's only, I mean, between the last version of Fidelio and the first version of Freischütz, there's only 6 years, or 7 years.
It's much funnier.
Freischütz is much funnier, absolutely. What else?
Well, in Fidelio you see the transition between really the classical way of presenting music and opera and what Wagner did later. Like the first part is very, like a bit like Mozart, very lyric, very different pieces, and the second part, the quartet, is durchkomponiert and dramatic and.
Okay, yes, very, very good, very, very good. Everyone knows Marceline, the Marcelina aria, O wäre ich doch schon mit dir vereint, and the first engine aria, Kommt in Schlagerbusch gegangen. They're almost the same music in a way. Okay, Marcelina, it has this, this sort of two-verse form. The Schlagerbusch is a little bit more like a rondo, with a very definite dance kind of element to it. I mean, if it were a dance, it would be a bolero, or at least what the early 19th century in Germany they thought of as a bolero. That was the title of the dance. So let's fast forward a little bit to okay, sorry. One more little thing. How many people of nobility are there in Fidelio? I mean, there's definitely the well. Yeah, it's sort of hard to tell, but I mean, definitely, Pizarro is probably noble, definitely. And there's the guy who comes at the end, who's I can't remember his name. He's
Fernando.
the governor, Fernando, exactly. He's also noble, definitely. And it's not really clear. Florestan and Leonora are definitely not peasants. No? What about Freischütz?
The prince.
Exactly.
And there's, yeah, because he's just like the father. Agate's father's more of a nobleman.
Yeah, but not really noble. He's just not rich and has authority. So definitely fewer. No? The whole point is not how many there are, but there are definitely fewer. So moving into sort of popular theater, especially in Austria in the 1840s, these tendencies really became stronger and stronger and stronger. There was always, like everyone, we all know about Schikaneder's theater, Theater der Wien, no? And we all know the kinds of stuff that he played, stuff that really pandered to popular tastes. I mean, this kind of theater was always going on. There was always, the high theater, the high opera for, people who could afford it, and there was always street theater for people who couldn't afford it. And operetta, what we now call operetta, is the place where those two things meet. Starting in the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s, very specifically in Vienna, and we're going to very specifically in Vienna, and the reason, I mean, you can sort of think of it as sort of development like this. You have down here, so 18th century over here, with very, very high opera, very, very low opera, and the sort of musical tendencies are moving closer and closer together towards the middle of the 19th century, and then again they drift apart again. And that moment, where there's the idea of dance music, of popular forms, of people from everyday life, like not the nobility, although there's certainly a lot of nobility in what we think of as operetta. But sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. These tendencies all converge at this place, and because there's in the middle of the 19th century so many really good composers who started devoting their talents to this kind of situation, that's why operetta became part of our standard repertoire. How many kinds of operetta are there? So now we got to what operetta there is. We have this thing called operetta. Three main ones. What are they?
Goldene, silberne. No?
No, not exactly. Kind of.
French, Austrian, and German.
Exactly, that's what I was going for. I mean, yes, there's this sort of golden, silver, that specifically refers to Vienna operetta.
Oh, okay.
No? So there's French operetta, Viennese operetta, and Berlin operetta. Viennese operetta is probably the one that we're all most familiar with. Johann Strauss, and Vielleicht noch was lustige Witwe, all of the Kalman pieces, Charlesfürsten, Zigeunerbaron, all of these pieces really belong to the Berlin operetta, the Viennese operetta. French operetta, for us, basically has been reduced to Offenbach. There's nothing else. Why? Has anyone ever heard of any other French operetta that was not by Offenbach?
I know I have.
I mean, there are millions. There are millions. But they are just musically so dreadful that they just have not survived. Well, because France with its extraordinarily centralized society and with its very strong class divisions even today, this sort of permeability between upper and lower class doesn't really exist in French culture. And so that's why operetta sort of was really definitely held down. And the only reason that French operetta really is a part of our repertoire at all is because a composer of Offenbach's qualities actually really elevated it. And operetta in France was in the 19th century, was a very political art form. You know, everything that went on on an operetta stage was political satire, social satire, very pointed jabs at people in the news of the day. And that sort of contemporaneity, that satirical element that is so dependent on something that one read in the newspaper yesterday, has really contributed to the disappearance of French operetta in the repertoire today, because we don't have that, I mean, if you nothing is as old as the satire from the day before yesterday, we see this on the internet today, a meme that was really funny yesterday is not necessarily funny today because we've forgotten the original context. And so that political level is missing for us. And even today, if we see a performance of a piece like Orphée aux Enfers, or La Belle Hélène, or La Grande Duchesse de Gerolstein, there are always moments in these pieces where we think, I don't get it. I understand the situation, I think it should be funny, but somehow I don't get it. And that's because we don't have the political awareness of what the actual situation is that this is putting under attack. This level of political satire never really made it into Viennese operetta. Viennese operetta has much more to do with class mobility. I mean, how many operettas are there where somebody dresses up as a duchess or a prince, or that it's happening all the time in Viennese operetta. I mean, Viennese operetta was not any less class, or Viennese society was not any less class conscious than Parisian society or even Berlin society. But somehow this playfulness with moving up and down the social scale became much more an element of operetta. Sorry, you had a question?
Because that's something that happens over and over again in Gilbert and Sullivan. So did Gilbert and Sullivan grow out of the Viennese tradition? Is that a whole
Not really. Well, that's kind of a whole different topic. Not really. I would say Gilbert and Sullivan came much more from the very specific English kind of theater world. It had less to do with the sort of musical, sorry, this question is sort of, I was not expecting that. The Gilbert and Sullivan, on a textual level, has really much more to do with actually more like Shakespeare, with this sort of idea that there can be very low comedy and very high tragedy right next to each other. And that tendency already in Elizabethan theater actually carried on in a very, very clear line all the way into the 19th century. And this, what we now sort of think of as, British humor, this sort of dark humor, it really has its roots very, very, very far back. The musical elements of Gilbert and Sullivan, again, the reason Gilbert and Sullivan survived is because it's the best examples of many millions of other pieces that were being played at the same time. It's just that musically, they weren't written by composers who were as gifted, and so they've disappeared from the repertoire because we don't find them musically interesting enough. The musical substance of the Gilbert and Sullivan pieces comes much more from the British tradition of incorporating incidental music into spoken plays, and certain tendencies that just sort of wanted to, I mean, if you look at a Gilbert and Sullivan piece, and if you see the amount of music that it actually is, it's really very small. Yeah. You can, I mean, a piece like Mikado, which is not a short piece, only has about this much music. It's very, very short, and so the proportion proportions are really, really different than, for example, a Viennese operetta. You know, Fledermaus is that thing. And yes, there's a lot of dialogue in Fledermaus, and it's not a short piece, but there are much more, the Viennese operetta, there's a much more sort of parity between the musical substance and the spoken substance. Whereas in Gilbert and Sullivan, basically it's a play with some incidental music. It just happens that the incidental music is way better than all of the other incidental music that was written in the late 19th century. So Viennese operetta, with its, you know, playing with the social scale, you know, am I, you know, a poor person pretending to be a princess, or am I a sort of half noble person pretending to be a very noble person, or am I a very noble person pretending to be a peasant? This kind of social mobility becomes a very prominent aspect of Viennese operetta. What about Berlin operetta? What are some Berlin pieces? It's definitely less well known than the Viennese stuff. There are, right now, if you're taking the subway anywhere in Berlin right now, there are big posters for Frau Luna.
Oh, I did research on that. I was looking for this.
Frau Luna.
So cool. So weird.
The ultimate Berlin operetta. I said the two ultimate Berlin operettas are Frau Luna and Vetter aus Dingster. Vetter aus Dingster, which is a very Berlin name. Like, Vetter means cousin, no? With V-E-T-T-E-R. Vetter aus, not the fat guy, but the cousin. You know, the cousin from Dingster, yeah, wherever, you know. Which is a super, I mean, it's a great piece. Does anybody know Vetter aus Dingster? Oh, it's so